So welcome everyone to today's School of Education Research Symposium series. And today's talk is a very interesting topic, exploring manufacturing industry leaders' perspectives of workforce skills. And you know that this is research that's in the state of Illinois, so it's right here close to home, looking at what's going on in our economy and our workforce. And our presenter is Dr. Ahmed Al-Sfor, so I'll let you go ahead and do it.
Thank you so much. So FYI, I do not know who is there. So, and I'm just gonna keep looking at the camera so that I maintain that eye contact. Well, first, thank you so much for your interest in this topic. So how do let me give you a little bit of an idea how I landed into this topic, right? So back in around this time, I had, oh, thank you for coming. So back around this time, I had a contact with a dean that a funder is looking or was looking into getting the perceptions of manufacturing industry leaders and what they perceive as the gap in the workforce, right? So this funder wanted to know what is the gap in the manufacturing workforce from the perspectives of leaders within the field. So I thought about it, in contact with the dean, with the funder, and I wanted to dig deeper into exactly what are they looking for, right? Because it could be done two ways. One, we could do a survey design where we can go and collect data through different funders, and that's possible. But through my discussions with them, they wanted kind of like a little bit more in-depth, more detail, more kind of insight into the study. So this kind of study requires kind of a little bit more working with people one-on-one and getting that in-depth knowledge. So based on that, I had a couple of GAs back then working with me, and then help with more or less data transcribing and collecting some of the literature that are relevant to this topic. So so what we did is that, okay, what exactly are we looking into? We're looking into human capital, we're looking into the perceptions of these individuals. So what I have done basically in order for me to design this study, I decided, okay, we need to get a little bit more significant, we need to get a little bit more in-depth review of the literature, what is available. And based on that review, I would be able to kind of frame my study. So we dug deeper into the studies. Ironically, there are some studies that discusses the gap in the workforce, but not from the view of leaders. You see that sometimes from HR perspectives, you see that a lot of academic, but from academic articles, like someone would write it, but not from the view. So we had a little bit of difficult time finding relevant literature. So this study basically that we conducted was to investigate what manufacturing industry leaders perceive as the skills gap and report the findings to the stakeholders, which were our funders. And based on that, I thought, okay, well, if we could collect this data, if we're going to go through the 9 yard or whatever yard we want to go through to do the study, I wanted to kind of develop a report, to develop a little bit an article out of this. So I took snippets of the paper. Technically, I was thinking about putting in bullets, but I thought give you guys a little bit an idea of the history of it. So the current study, this study basically sheds light on workforce skills gap in the state of Illinois from the perspective of manufacturing leaders. So the question that I decided to have for this study was, what do manufacturing industry leaders perceive as needed to close the skills gap, right? We have skills gap in the workforce. It's there, the literature, we're going to talked about it. But what is that based on whose perspective? Based on the leaders. What I mean by leaders, talking about CEOs, senior officials or senior leaders within their companies. I wanted to get their perspectives. So I had to, again, I had to go through the process of looking into the literature. When I did, I go through literature. I wanted to look into literature from different angles to see what is available. First, I wanted to look into manufacturing within the US industry, right? So the term manufacturing, how has that changed? One thing I found interesting in the literature, and it is to a certain degree known, was a trend of declining manufacturing work in the US. So if you look at it for the past 50 years, all we're seeing is declining in terms of the number of people working in manufacturing, where the US economy is going to be more a service-based industry rather than manufacturing. If we look at it, 50 years ago or more, we see a gradual decline in terms of manufacturing. So that has changed, especially during COVID, where the output has declined tremendously. Why? Because a lot of factories, a lot of companies closed down because of that close proximity of people working in the workforce, right? In the manufacturing sectors, a lot of people working within the same factory. You see a lot of individuals basically getting infected much, much easier. Especially if you look at my father works at a plant where in Iowa, and the same plant that they have, it was also in Sioux Falls, South Dakota. Once one person infected or two individuals, you have hundreds of people getting infected within the same week. Close proximity, you have to work. So the output, that's only one field. So the output in manufacturing has declined. And now we are paying for that, right? When you see inflation high, one of the reasons because people are working, there was a decline in production. Supply chain, common sense, economic one-on-one, right? So we see now is a huge. It's funny that even here at Carbondale, I was looking at driving the other day. I see there's a gas station always sell family package chicken and whatever they have here. It always says for $7.99. I was driving, stopped in the gas station and looked. I see a sign changed $9.99. I was like, okay. That makes sense. Now see how the increase of cost, and that cost is going to increase whether we see it in our gas and in everything that we do. And the reason is because if gas goes up, guess what? That has to be passed on to something. It's going to affect other things. So again, we looked into manufacturing workforce, the history in the manufacturing in the United States, and we see a decline. Then I looked at it and said, okay, what about the shortage? I typo here. What is about the shortage of the skilled workforce? So we looked into that. We saw a gap occurs when there is a mismatch between people, right? What is the workforce looking for rather than what is available? And this is basically, this helps me also reflect on my own son. He's in high school, right? What helps me is, okay, what do you want to study? And how what you're studying now is going to be 10 years from now, 20 years from now. Is this something that needed, or technology, robotic will take over? So this is something you need to think about right now in order for you to reflect on it later. So to obtain higher employability and maintain competitive edge, look into the knowledge, look into the skills gap that is always needed. So you have to look into things that will always be needed. Then we moved on, like, okay, how about we look into skills gap and shortage? Then how about the skills gap, the manufacturing workforce? So we looked into that. So a skills gap occurs when there is, again, mismatch to obtain higher employability, when there is a wide range of existing. So anyhow, so we looked into leading to productivity. So what is am I looking for a job just because it's a job or something that I'm interested in? Because if there's interested in something, if this is something that I want, I'm going to be more productive, right? So, and that's, you see that even in faculty, you see that in anywhere you work, right? You see someone that is really, that is what he or she wants to do in life, typically they will be more productive than someone who would just, you know what, just gonna try to finish those 8 hours a day and move on. All right, so we looked into theoretical frameworks and we looked at it. Okay, so we're going to look into competitive advantage. We look into the economics, because leaders look into what? If am I going to hire someone? Oops, we're going to hire someone. It's not what I'm hiring you because I like you. It's because most likely I need to leverage you or skills to help me in the workforce, right? So what? All right. So anyhow, so we looked into the human capital theory by Prickers, which is basically established in 1962 from the University of Chicago, and we tried to figure out, okay, what do you call it? To examine the skills gap and the challenge employers encounter in the study. Basically, looking at this theoretical framework, human capital is composed of intangible items like skills, knowledge, marketability of being hired, ability of employees to create economic value. And that is basically what leaders want. If I'm going to hire people, what economic value are you going to give me? So that's kind of, you know, why I looked at this or use this theoretical framework as a gap, right? As a lens for my study. So we look at it from competitive advantage in terms of the workforce. So we use this human capital theory. All right, and then basically human capital theory looks into investments. People invest in education, training, development into that human capital, and then ROI. ROI is return on investments, and how return on investments will help us, right? Increase productivity, advantage, productivity, wages, and profit, and so forth, right? So one thing we want to look at is creating that competitive advantage. And this reminds me by when you look into competitive advantage, for example, in the 40s, when the US, a lot of some US pretty much took over a lot of Japan economically, meaning that someone like Deming, right? Someone like Deming went to help the Japanese after World War II to help them produce products, create that, develop something other than military base. So Deming was kind of he was the quality management guru back in the day. So he looked and said, okay, here's a process. Here's what's happening right now. How can we create it better? How can we improve on it? And that is basically what Deming did. So that's why, like in the 40s, 50s, 60s, all the way to the 80s and to the 90s, until a certain degree today, a lot of us buy Japanese products because of the quality that's in them. It's the quality of what? The people that produces them, right? So that's why a lot of products that came from Japan in that era, because of that productivity, they created that competitive advantage, not based on how many produced, but the quality of work that was being produced. So that's basically when you look into human capital and return on investments. So we looked at it and we selected a case study design, qualitative study, because we wanted to have that in-depth conversation with individuals who are leaders in the field. And I'm going to explain how we collect the data in a minute, but we decided to use basically a case study design to address our research. So, of course, these are not the real names. So what we did, we through the funder, who the funder works closely with different manufacturing industry leaders in the field, was able to reach out to them and encourage them to participate in our study. So we did 14 participants. So we reached out. That's a lot of time consuming. It's a lot of work. People think that qualitative research it's just an easy research. It's harder, and it takes at least 2 or 3 times more the time that you do than a quantitative. One, the writing is more. 2, the data itself, it's the analysis. It's time consuming to do, because imagine 14 participants, if each took half an hour. So typically you'll multiply 30 minutes by 4, and just in order for you to transcribe, right? So once we took the data from these 4 participants, we went through the data collection process. We reached out, we collected data through, we used Zoom because it was kind of the hype of COVID. So we collected data through interviews using videos with Zoom. And then after we collected data, we transcribed, okay? One thing I did, since I had 2 GAs, I had pretty much both of them review the transcriptions. To review both of them, one, to ensure accuracy. Two, I wanted to make sure that the scribe data is accurate. So we did, again, data collection. We collected the data, and then of course we went through analysis using theoretical analysis. Theoretical analysis, basically, it has 6 steps. We're talking about, like, you read the data first time, you become familiar with it, making sure that the data that's there is reflective of what's being said. And then we try to code. Once you transcribe, you read it a few times, make sure everything is good. You try to code. And then, of course, you generalize the initial coding. One thing that we did a little bit differently, because right away, typically, theoretical analysis sometimes looks from codes all the way to themes, right? But one thing I wanted to make sure we look into developing from codes to categories, and then from those categories, we identified the themes that were that we were able to get from the data. Of course, we received the themes, and we looked at the themes, we defined them. That's part of the this analysis, and then we wrote the reports or the report. So here is basically what we did, and that's how we reviewed. So one question, and that's some of you are qualitative researcher, frequencies. Typically frequencies, that's not something associated with qualitative research. I understand that, but we used it to give us an idea of how often those were repeated, right? So we looked into once we developed codes, we took them into categories, and based on those categories, we developed a theme, and then within the theme itself, we define what exactly does this theme really mean, right? So we have 4 themes, one of which is, for example, the lack of relevant and hands-on experience. So, and that is the mismatch, right? We talked about before. You have a lot of people graduating, right? But their skills, their education is not what the field needs. That's one. 2, hands-on experience. So I heard that several times during the interviews, where internship was not part of a lot of the schools within the state of Illinois, that students just know the theories, right? That have basic knowledge, but they do not have hands-on experience. However, they're expecting high salaries because I have a college degree. So having experience is critical, and that could be obtained through internship. And we'll talk about, actually, I'm doing another study similar to that, as hopefully I'll present it next year. Anyhow, so the second theme was transition from content-based knowledge to practical. And that's similar to the first theme. But here I said, okay, you got all that knowledge. How do you apply it? How do you apply it? No idea. So just like, for example, taking someone statistics class, right? Knowing all of the stats. because we give them the scenario by which they will need to analyze. But if they don't do data collection themselves, they don't go through the process, they might not be able to apply that knowledge within their education. I didn't say they're within their workforce. Third, we looked into limited durable goods. What is durable goods? You see a lot of generations, especially we go through different generations, right? I did a study on that before. Different generations, talking about the veterans generation, the baby boomer generation, Generation X, Generation Y, Generation Z. And I'm not sure what generation COVID we have now. I guess I'm not sure what the new generation will be called. Especially this applies to Generation Z, that are that basically Generation Z, talking about anyone born from 2001 until now, that are entering the workforce. They have limited, according to the participants, limited durable goods. Limited durable goods, talking about critical thinking, learning abilities, math, multitasking, talking about that soft skills to work with one another, right? To work with teams. They have the social part is not well developed, according to them, compared to the previous generation. And that could be for a variety of change, because society itself is changing, or for different reasons. But again, that is part of the challenge that they have. For example, math skills, the complaint was a lot of them need calculators to do the math. They cannot do, just see something, say, okay, here's what needs to be done. Here's do the measurements and do the work, especially in manufacturing field. This something applies to me. So the fourth one was utilizing technology across manufacturing industry. So I get train people with certain technology. That technology itself either becomes obsolete after a few years, or different technology have to, these students or these individuals now, I have to train them on. So that was another situation. So either technology become obsolete that they used, or it's different technology what the manufacturing or schools or universities and community colleges teach, and what the actual work or the field itself uses. All right. So kind of that's basically the finding. So we look into human capital theory, even though it's criticized, it's very well criticized theory. I believe that the lens that I wanted to see my study is from that perspective on manufacturing industry leaders. And again, going back to that, manufacturing industry leaders wants to see value of their employees. What are you going to give back, or are you going to give me, rather than what am I going to give you, right? And that it's based on economic growth, creating that competitive advantage. So that's what we used. Again, consistent with the literature, most of the participants articulated the challenge of hiring qualified employees in the industry. That is a challenge. We cannot find qualified individuals. The lack of skilled workers led employers to hire unskilled workers and train them within the field. And that's a challenge. So a lot of employers said, okay, well, we just need someone to work for us, and we will train them. But that presents another challenge, because a lot of these individuals, according to the participants, looking for jobs. So you know what that means? I'm going to train someone for 3-4 months, 5 months, 6 months. By 6 months, that person might be able to do the work, right? As someone who knows the work ins and out. But guess what's going to happen? Because the jobs are, there are very few employees looking for jobs, and the job market, unemployment rate is very, very low. A lot of these individuals, once they get a job that's better paid salary, they just get up and leave. The employers spend thousands of dollars training them. Now, I lost money and out of work. So that's kind of basically the overall discussions that took place. Now, what we found also, there is a gap. Qualitative research always talk about limitations. There are certain limitations known in qualitative research. Okay, there's no point to say there's a limitation of qualitative research because I only interviewed 12 people, 13 people. Well, you know that from the get-go. So, like the nature of qualitative research, of course, the findings that we cannot generalize it across sectors because that's a normal thing in qualitative research. And instead, researchers sought to uncover. So we wanted to kind of dig deeper to see what do these individuals perceive? What are the challenges? What is needed to support them in the state of Illinois? So that's kind of what we looked at. Due to the stringent criteria for participants, we did not distinguish. So we looked into one issue here. We have, because we were working with our funder, we did not have a say, hey, I want to only interview people in southern part of Illinois or Chicago area or certain parts. We did not. So this is kind of a collective view that some of it was done in the southern part of Illinois, some of it in Chicago area and other parts. So we had no control. Like in quantitative research, you want to have control of samples, right? We did not have that. We just looked into who was willing to participate based on the view of the funder. So the region, the business type was out of our control when it comes to the study. So furthermore, basically studies should also examine prospective stakeholders. So we looked into the perspective of the stakeholders, right? And that perspective is one way, right? This is what we perceive. A study that I'm working on right now is looking at it the opposite way, how students are view it now, right? So that study is complete. I have not even written the report yet, but I already, we have already, gotten the themes. We're going through the same process, coding categories, developing themes, and then summary of those themes. We have already done that process, but we have not had the time to start writing the report, which hopefully by summer I might be able to finish it up. So that's kind of in essence the overall study that we have completed. It's interesting because as someone who moved to Illinois about a year and a half or 2 years ago, only less than 2 years ago, I was able to learn a lot about the different manufacturing sectors within the state of Illinois. It not only gave us the chance to work with them, but also allows for us as institutions to say we are available to the market. We are ready to do support in terms of research, get funding, and that's critical part that all of us faculty, I think, should focus on as primary is grant funding projects. And based on that, we can develop articles because it helps both ways. So it's not, for my fellow faculty, I think it's better to have a funded project because you get the funding, you get to write articles for something that you get paid for during some time. So that's kind of my study. I will open the floor for questions. Even though I do not know who is out there right now, I don't see.
We can put it up.
Yeah, if you can put it out there, so at least I can be able to answer.
Do you want to stop screen sharing, or do you want to see both sides?
No, I'm good.
Okay, so we'll stop sharing your screen, and there they are. Yep, everyone's showing.
All right.
So questions, everyone who was in the room here actually had to leave early to go to another meeting.
Yes.
So our Zoom audience is our entire audience at this point. Questions for our presenter?
I'll just start this.
Before, I just there are certain people I want to acknowledge and thank, right? The two GAs that helped me, and then there was a third one, and without mentioning names, I just want to kind of put it out there that I'm thankful for them. Special thanks to Dr. Bacon for reviewing and editing the paper several times, final report. So thank you, Dr. Bacon. Thank you, Jennifer, for your support as well. So I really appreciate it.
It was a team effort, right?
It was a team effort. I mean, a lot of faculty helped me, and you know, I received a lot of good feedback from you all, and so I truly appreciate it.
All right, Lyle, did you have a question?
Oh, I just going to mention again, Dr. Ellis, first of all, that it was great that I like the list of the fact that a lot of those people were from operations again, and not from HR. So big thanks for that. So we, coming from operations, myself again, we get tired of HR always answering for us based upon what the future, what the workforce is. It's always by job title. It never really matters what they know when they come in. It was nice that the skill set was based upon the skill set of the people that are coming into the jobs, and not necessarily just based upon head count and job title or years of experience. It's what they know when they actually showed up. So that was an appreciation again, very, very, very good. And then of course, being a tech guy again, I appreciated the comments again that they made for robotics too, of all things. So.
Thank you, I appreciate it. And yeah, and that's one thing that interested me about the study is that I was able to get different perspective from individuals that have been in the field 20 years, 15 years, as far as even 2 years. So it's kind of, you know, a variety of perspectives. Thank you.
Yeah, actually piggybacking off of that, I was curious because out of the 14 people who were sampled, the minimum number of years they had been in that C-suite position was 3 years. I was wondering if that was a deliberate function of your sort of inclusion exclusion criteria, or whether that was really maybe more just a function of it takes you a couple of years getting into that sort of position before you get your head above water enough to participate in a research study.
Well, we did not, and it was not part of the criteria. It was like, okay, we contacted the funder and we said, okay, who do you recommend? Because this report will benefit you primarily, and of course we will be able to use the data.
So they may have had some criteria you don't know.
So no, they did not have criteria. They reached out to a lot of manufacturing industries in the state of Illinois, and for some reason they don't. Many of them did not respond, and this is something for a lot of the students, especially here, what's called graduate students. I see 3 of you here. One thing, you know, I had to learn the hard way. If you do an interview, offer something to the students. I know it's not the norm.
To the participants?
To the participants. I did a study, tried to live knows with the students in the manufacturing, trying to get their perspectives. I contacted about 50 some community colleges. I was able only to collect data from 2 out of what? Hundreds, not actually thousands of students. Only 2 participated. And Sarah knows this, she works with the IRB. So I had to go, I was like, okay. I said, you know what, let me just do it with SIU. I won't try to SIU manufacture students in the STEM program. Only 1 responded or 2. And I was like, what is the deal? I had to go change the IRB, offer a gift card for about, I think, $15 or so for each participant before I start having, you know, a little bit drop every day. If students said, hey, I'll do it for, you know, 30 minutes for $15, I'll do it. So that was something unique.
The economics of research.
The economics, I mean, that's part of the economics, right? So what is in it for me?
I've got a few questions and comments, if I may.
Yes, please.
So one, based on one of the earlier questions that I think Dr. Curran asked, you've got enough data, I think, where you could take another slice of it and you could look at participants' responses based on their number of years in their jobs. What's a little limiting is the length of the interviews, because the interviews were fairly short. And I think more probing needed to happen in those interviews. So there might be that it might be a bit limiting, but I think you could go back into that data and reanalyze that data, looking for the commonalities and distinctions in the responses between positions, similar positions based on years of length. So that's one thing. But another thing that's been kind of nagging at me is going out to the community colleges. To me, it seemed like that might have been a place to start to figure out what they were doing, what their perceptions were, and then interview the manufacturing and see, what their to see how they worked with the community colleges, because specifically for many of the skills that they were referring to, especially the highly skilled machine operator positions, the CNC machining, tool and die making, those aren't necessarily like manufacturing jobs that folks at SIU with a 4-year degree would be looking at. Those are more community college positions. And so within the state's career and technical education programs, the high schools have specific pathways they work with the community colleges. And the community colleges and the high schools work with employers. And so I wasn't able to get a sense of that in the data. And I'm wondering if that might be something to think about as you think about expanding the study, or maybe going back and re-interviewing or interviewing anybody new.
I agree with you. The second study, the second question you mentioned, working with the community colleges, I think it's critical, because I know there's a path for CT for classes at the high school, and then they can learn that as well in community colleges, and they need to work a little bit with employers. And this is something that basically the findings from the study, also the suggestions from the study, was for community colleges to work closely with manufacturing industry leaders. That's the second question. As far as the first questions, I agree with you also that I think there's so much data out there that I could, take this study together with the study I'm just finishing up to have projects for the next 3 years to, quote unquote, like one professor told me, milk those studies, meaning that the data is very saturated, that I can break it into parts and get 2 or 3, actually 3 or 4 manuscripts, articles, information from them. So that is needed. The one thing that I wanted to do is going back to these studies, breaking them and looking at them a little bit in depth. I'm sure other themes could emerge from the data that we have. Look at it slightly differently.
Yeah, I think that I'm going to push back a little on what you just said, because in qualitative research, the themes never emerge. They're always found by the researcher. They're always identified by the researcher. They're interpreted by the researcher. But I think when you look at that data, you can slice that data different ways to exploit different aspects of it, which will illuminate different facets of what you've been studying. And I think that would provide for some fascinating research to build from this.
Actually, thank you for correcting me. I always tell my students, I always tell my students, do not say data in qualitative research emerge. Always identify, and this is basically make sure in the qualitative paper, we use the word identify, we do not use the word emerge. So it was a slip of a tongue, it's a slip when I said emerge, because data is not, thank you for correcting me. because data
But
never
I
emerges.
just wanted to, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
I just wanted to push back on that a bit because we've got students here and I do a lot of reviews of qualitative research for proposals and manuscripts for qualitative articles and research. And so I wanted to push back a little bit on that because it's still, that's a phrase that's so commonly used and we still see it. And that's something that reviewers will ding.
Thank you so much.
No
You know, you mentor me through a lot, so I just want to say thank you, Dr.
We
Bacon.
we mentor each
I think
other.
I think you're not sugarcoat it, not because you're here. I think you're one of the top, not the top qualitative researcher at the university. So thank you.
Thank you, but I like that we can, as colleagues, mentor each other and that work with doc students and have them also mentor and work with us. So it's like that reciprocal learning that's just really rich.
I agree with you. Thank you.
Other questions? Let me ask you a little question about, so this was a funded project. You brought in a grant to do this. And I've been doing workshops so some of the attendees here have been kind of following the grants workshops as well. So let's try to tie this in. How did you kind of get connected with the funding opportunity? Did you like search for grants online and found a request for funding, or
sometimes life works in mysterious ways. I never thought about being a professor, never thought about many things, never thought about ending out in SIU, but this grant's kind of unique because typically for students, you will reach out to funders and ask for, here's the project I would like to do, but this funding came landing on me to do through the dean. The funder reached out to us, so that was unique, and I was like, okay, well, I don't have to write grant, but I'm in charge of it, and so it was kind of landed, and it was back and forth of what to do and how the grant will start, and the dean says, here's what I want you to do. I was like, I don't even know who was in the grant, the list of in faculty, until as I was working on it. So it typically you would reach out to funders, and it's critical that I think for professors, again, like I mentioned, for doctoral students, to find funding because it helps the university a lot, because especially School of Education, because part of that funding will go to the School of Education, right? And that's how the school will have extra money, because everything, almost 95%, is giving to the universities and the school. Here's what you need to do with that money. That's it. Salary, staff. Here's what. But the GA, healthcare, and other things, or GA help, it's only like 5 or 6%, and that the dean can play with, right? Or control. So most of the funding, the school funding will increase based on the grants that you bring in. The more grants you bring in, the more money that your school would have.
Well, I wanted to point out that this was a little bit of a different.
Yes.
A little bit of a different situation, because we're a research university and we're known for doing research. Sometimes, and this is kind of the hidden work that administrators do that the rest of us don't really see, but they're out there talking to important people in the community. And sometimes what happens is, so this organization came to SIU, somehow got directed to
The dean.
To our dean, and said, hey, we have a need for this research to be done. Can you connect us with a researcher who could do it? And so the dean, put together the right people. And you said you didn't write a proposal, but I think you did. I think you had to do something.
Oh, yeah.
Through OSPA, but it wasn't the big competitive, proposal like you would put in a SEF or something.
No.
And they came to us and wanted us to do it.
And that kind of worked because I was kind of pretty much I was here even during COVID, that's like doing sometimes was every day here. And it's kind of, the dean saw me, it's like, okay, well, what do you think of this? And the conversation took place from there, and that's how I ended up doing this project. And still the funder, I'll give you the information for the funder, still looking for other projects. They just made a call, and then I think actually the call just ended for a certain project that they wanted. All right.
So maybe some more opportunities.
Definitely.
Projects this way. I think if you establish a good relationship, or if you do a project well, it reflects well on our organization, and then that agency, whether it's a competitive process like you're kind of coaching people towards this semester, or whether it's this sort of networked process that led to this grant, if you do a good job fulfilling the proposed project, then that reflects well on our organization and enhances our reputation, and then causes others to want to fund projects with us again. And frankly, that's probably part of how you ended up with this grant, was the existing reputation of the university. They came to us because they know us for doing research, even if the individuals who are here are different than the individuals maybe who were here at the time that reputation was founded. So anything that you do, and you're putting the SIU name on it, you are contributing to the reputation of the organization, and others have built that reputation ahead of you, and you're building it for the people who come after you. And so it's actually very important to keep in mind that when you do good work, it doesn't just it benefits you, but it doesn't just benefit you, it benefits a lot of people indirectly as well.
That's true, and that's basically when the project pretty much ended. I needed help, like editing, reviewing the work that I've done, due diligence. So I had to seek out to you, and of course, Dr. Bacon. I said, hey, what do you think? What feedback? What can I add to it? How can I fix? How can I put it in a way that's the funder will appreciate and think highly of, so that they come back to us again to do other projects.
It would also be interesting to know how community colleges are communicating with these mid-level manufacturers, right? And what kind of connects and disconnects are found between the folks who are doing the hiring and the training, the people you interviewed, and their community college counterparts. Like, where does the communication occur? Where does it not occur?
Sounds like a grand project we should collaborate on.
It's just, I'm wondering, is the communication occurring at a level above or below them? Where's the disconnect with the community colleges? And how easy or difficult is it to network with those community colleges?
Yeah, it's very difficult for some reason. I do not know. Like, for example, today I just reached out. I do not know. So for example, today I reached out to Johnny Logan Community College. They have someone in charge of the workforce development, things like that. I didn't even know that person. I happened to go last week to see what class my son can take while he's doing high school, take classes there, so he can transfer to SIU later on. And when I was done, I was like, who is in charge of this? Who's in charge of this? So I had to reach out to someone this morning, actually, saying, okay, well, is there any way we can get to know each other, so maybe you can collaborate somewhat, at least have the conversation open for later on.
Yeah, and it's interesting because of the manufacturer's perspectives, right?
Mhm.
But what are, how do the community colleges seeing themselves working in partnership with the manufacturers?
Correct. Another thing that it'd be interesting to look at, with the decline in manufacturing jobs, how is that also affecting community college programs?
Exactly. I see Lyle smiling and nodding his head. So I want to invite, I know it's your presentation and I don't want to like step in and take over, which I kind of am doing, but with watching Lyle's reaction, I really want him, I want to hear what you're thinking, Lyle.
I mean, this is really tuned in well. I mean, for instance, we just received 2 more robots in our program. So you're right, the programs are changing. The head count's down, but the technology is up. And there's just so much, there's a lot there that, and you talked about Dr. Bacon, you talked about the diagonal slice that's there between, people that have worked in their industry for 3 years versus 20 years. And I bet the responses are probably different, versus some, for instance, the ones on the older half are going to be talking about those durable skills, maybe that Dr. Ford talked about, and some of the youngers may be talking about addressing with robotics and technology again. So they probably are very different.
But then there's still that question, right? How does that get machine operators who have the requisite skills on the plant floors?
Interesting.
I don't mean to,
Oh,
but
No.
on the education side, we have a pipeline that is created here in Southern Illinois that I'm working on as a grad assistant with 11 local high schools and 2 community colleges and SIU. So we're starting from the junior high school level students who want to get into education and creating a career pathway for them to get into the community colleges, even at the start of their junior or senior year in high school. So by the time that they graduate high school, they already have an associate's degree in education. And then we can jump them, if they haven't gotten one, into the community college after high school and then onto SIU. So maybe that's something that needs to be looked into with SIU and the community colleges and the gaps that they're seeing, and then trying to, fill those in with the, businesses that you're speaking with.
And I just want to point out that many of the high schools around the state have those career and tech ed programs that do that. And students, for example, can not start their apprenticeships while they're in high school, but they can begin doing internships and they can begin taking community college courses at the same time they're taking high school courses to have dual credit to prepare them for the kinds of careers that either go for a certificate at the community college that will let them work in a manufacturing related position, or an associate's degree at the community college, or if they're going to a four-year university like SAU. So I would think it would be important to really connect and milk those CTE pathways. They're called career pathways. To really milk those CTE pathways and communicate with folks at the high school, the community college, and as well as the manufacturing levels. I don't know what that would look like, but it would be interesting to get those different perspectives about how those communication networks actually work in practice.
Sorry, I was trying to find the document that I have for my son, where they show classes that can be taken at the community college level while he's in high school. He might be able to take, at least finish the first year and a half, and that would be aligned to his pre-med interest into SIU, and then maybe to SIU Springfield and so forth. So that's, critical, how that's all planned.
Yeah, one of my former high school students, because I was the I was the career and tech ed teacher for marketing management and entrepreneurship. And I served as our high school's local director. So I went up to the local director meetings in Phoenix every month. And at the same time, I also got my reading specialist, and my path took my career path took that route. But as a CTE teacher, I had a student, Lord knows he ended up with me because he set fire to the garbage can at his public high school and was long-term suspended. So he ended up at our school. I ended up realizing he was brilliant, took him across the street to the community college, helped him do all the AccuPlacer testing, and he tested into advanced college algebra as a 9th grader. By the time he graduated, he had 27 units of community. By the time he graduated high school, he had 27 units of community college credits, and all the engineering, math, coursework, physics, everything else, and got a 2-year internship at Raytheon in Tucson and a full ride to the University of Arizona.
So things work in mysterious ways.
Right. But when we're thinking about the manufacturing gap, right, and the kinds of jobs that employers need filled, my father was a master craftsman, tool and die maker. So I grew up in his shop. And I watched him with the different apprentices he had. And so I think the work you're doing is so critical and so key, Dr. Alaspour. And I'm wondering, like, how this can be enhanced to really get people talking to each other to look at those processes.
I think one of the things is that
Address those gaps.
I think one thing is that we have to look at is the mutual benefits, right? What is the mutual benefit for manufacturing? What's the mutual benefits of community colleges? What is the mutual benefit for us as researchers, right? So had that grant not come landed in our labs, would we have done this? Most likely not. So, but you said, okay, you know, it's the grant is there, I'm gonna leverage it, use it financially and non-financially, right? And then what benefit am I going to give the community college? What am I going to the state? How about the stakeholders that are all involved in this? So that's, I think, creating that connection, build that communication between these 3 entities, for example.
Yeah, so yeah, just by their friends, just by their nature, again, community colleges are so much closer to the industry partners. So because we feed them on a direct basis. We talk to a lot of the industry people on a weekly basis, again, for all these technical openings and all types of other things. And so just by nature, there's that close relationship again. So, and it's kind of a waste sometimes as I think about how that doesn't exist at the university level, because it's a big thing. It's a macro level versus micro level.
That's a good point, Lyle. And I see Valerie nodding her head as well, because I think there's also that communication between the high schools and the community colleges. So how do we create that 3-way, actually 4-way loop between high schools, manufacturers, community colleges, and 4-year institutions?
Well, I'll say again, on the education side, we all get together. And so we now know that there's a gap that needs to be filled in the technical side. We know what the skills are needed. So now we just need to be able to provide high schoolers that career pathway to the technical side. You just take education out of it. Just fill in technical in that section. And then we've got that pathway that could be created. You literally can mimic what we're doing on the education side for the technical side. You just put in different people in those positions.
All right, we are just about out of time for today.
They're definitely getting their money's worth out of this, Dr. Alaspour, again, because they're
Definitely, I'll definitely take that. I'll definitely take the recommendation from Dr. Bacon and others that, have these two projects. I think it will keep me busy for the next 2 years, looking at them. Sometimes the hardest part is having data. And once you have data, you don't have to go far, just use it. Not to overkill it, but at the same time, leverage it.
Well, and data is a beautiful thing.
Definitely. All right, thank you all.
All right, let me interject here briefly. I wanted to try to shut off the recording, but I'm having a hard time doing that. Okay, well, I'll just let it go. We'll edit it later. But just wanted to put in my weekly plug here for our upcoming presentations. These are, I believe, all of our remaining presentations for this semester. So next week, we have a panel discussion, and this is in our symposium series, but the topic happens to be the role of mentoring in pursuing grants. And so these are, the panelists are folks who have been mentored, and it's impacted their ability to bring in grants. And so we're going to learn a little bit more about, how that worked for them and the role that played in them bringing in grants. The following week, on April 11th, we have an external speaker, Dan Robinson, and he's written all sorts of interesting things in education. When the flyer for this one comes out, look for an extra attachment, because when I asked him to present, he said, you know what would be more interesting than me presenting? It would be if your audience read my article and then came and we all discussed it. So, so you notice it says a discussion here. So, so he is going to be discussing with us pseudoscience in education, that's going to be a very interesting presentation as well. I read his article that will be circulating. On April 18th, we have Kelly Alongai, and I hope I pronounced, if she's still on, I hope I pronounced her name correctly. And she is coming from the Office of Sponsored Projects Administration. So she will actually be presenting our next workshop in the workshop series on Monday, April 18th. She's going to talk us through everything that you have to do to work with the Office of Sponsored Projects Administration to submit your grant. And a key aspect of this is that generally we don't submit our own grants. Generally, the Office of Sponsored Projects Administration does that for us, or on certain grants we can do it, but with their permission. We have to have clearance from them first. And then finally, this April 25th, believe it or not, is the last Monday of the semester. After that is final exam week, which comes a little early this year. So on the final Monday of the semester before final exam week, I will be presenting on peer review, but specifically peer review of grant proposals. So that's it. We're winding down here. And you might notice I added to the flyer, if you have an idea for a future topic, I'm working on setting things up for the fall series. So we'll be starting up again in the fall. We don't do the first week. We don't do final exam week, and we don't do the first week, and we don't do any of the holidays where classes are canceled. But other than that, I try to put together either a symposium or a workshop for us, so that we're consistently coming here on Mondays to communicate, to be aware of what each other is doing, and to learn more and learn how to do things better. So super excited for all of that. Again, thank you all for attending. This is hopefully been, just a really illuminating and helpful series for you. But again, if you have ideas, feel free to email me because we're always developing.